welcome back. Episode 2 of the Woo Curious podcast. I'm here again with Eileen.
Hi.
And we're going to talk today about living in alignment with nature. What a great topic. Eileen, I know that you refer to this as cyclical living. What the hell does that even mean?
I'm so glad you asked. It's funny, every time I've been a guest on podcasts, I always feel for the host when they have to introduce me. And part of what they talk about is that I'm a cyclical living guide. And you can tell who practiced that word ahead of time because it's a tongue twister.
It is.
Sorry. It's a really tongue twistery word for a really simple concept. And that's basically living and planning life in alignment with the cyclical energies of the earth. So think about the seasons, of the moon, that waxing and waning, and of our bodies. And especially if we are in biologically female bodies that bleed, our menstrual cycle. There's the even larger cycle as well of life cycle, moving from maiden to mother to crone to death. So that's really what I mean. Cyclical living is finding ways to move in harmony with those energies instead of fighting upstream against them.
I love that.
And
It gives us a path.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that you talked a lot about in our first episode about kind of being raised to live in alignment with nature, which I know has a lot of overlaps there. So what does that mean for you?
Yeah, living in alignment with nature for me is really based on, I think, a combination of seasons. And I think of seasons in terms of like plant nature and animal nature, how we plant things and harvest things, when we can things and then enjoy them during our hibernation season, our winter. And living in alignment with nature is also really an opportunity for us to, like I just said, like have a path forward, but for us to regulate our systems, whether we know it or not, regulate our systems. Like if anybody's ever felt burnt out after summer, like, August, September hits, and we are just so excited to be able to enjoy some time by ourselves or enjoy some time slowing down, or we've had the experience of the desire and the pull to spring clean.
Yeah.
And I think I was having a conversation earlier with a friend of mine around the productivity that not to get too heavy at the beginning of the episode, but the productivity that the Industrial Revolution really instilled in us. Also, hashtag FTP, where
FTP.
we are really conditioned to be on all the time, and then we go off on the weekend. We turn it off on the weekend. We have a 40 hours a week that we put in, and we go off on the weekend. But on the weekend, actually, it's not off. It's just shifting to whatever familial responsibilities we have, or going out with our friends and socializing because we've masked all week in the professional setting that doesn't actually fit us, but it's what we do, and it's how we make a living. And so I think living in alignment with nature is really an opportunity for us to also live our lives with the ebb and flow of the natural energies of the moon, the natural energies of Mama Earth, the natural energies of the season of life that we're in, and of course the seasons, the cyclical living portion of things. So
yeah, I like to think of it, for me, you hit the nail on the head, because it is that like real tie to constant productivity being part of how worthy we are. We feel like laziness is a sin. I mean, it is one of the 7 sins in Christianity, I think. Here we go with religion again.
Yeah, I don't know.
Nothing about this podcast will just be light.
No.
We'll approach things from a light manner, but it's going to go deep. It's that sense of permission. And as much as I like to say, you don't need permission to rest, you don't need permission to take care of yourselves, the reality, the lived experience of so many of us is that we really do need permission, at least in the early days of practice, to give ourselves that space and that rest and that downtime. So I find that cyclical living is this beautiful gift of permission to rest in season and in cycle with the moon and my body.
Totally. And I think, nature is there to hold us in this energy, like we are provided everything we need. We don't need to look elsewhere. We just are seekers and we naturally want to do this. But if we really look at, like, the sun doesn't shine the sun actually does shine every single day. It's just sometimes cloudy. Bad example.
I'm singing in my head now also.
Yeah. Excellent. But we actually have, nature isn't like, it's not summer all the time, because if that's the case, it would be like in BC, it's strong sun here, and we have burnt grass from June 2nd until December 1st, and that's not we have to really water our gardens. That's not necessarily the ideal for things. Like, we don't want to have that burnout. But if we really look at the season of nature and how seasonally and energetically it embodies the ebb and flow of life, we really get to see. And I think there's a good example here as well with the tide is not always in, it's not always out. And then we have the pull of the moon, it's not always full. It's just like, if we just calmed the F down for a minute, we would see so much
swear
more.
On this podcast. Can we swear on this podcast?
I'm no longer censoring. No longer.
It's interesting because we expect this constant output of ourselves. But if you think of it in terms, again, going back to like plant life, you cannot be in perpetual harvest. There's no such thing. You have to plant the seed and wait for it to grow its cotyledon leaves, and then you need to wait for it to sprout, and then it has to flower, and then it sets fruit, and then the fruit ripens, and then you can harvest. And it's not until the next planting season comes again, which is often a whole like cycle later, that you can do it over again. So to expect ourselves to be able to be in perpetual harvest, if you think of the output of your labor or your work as a harvest, is ludicrous. Like, the fact that we hold ourselves to these standards is an imposed paradigm, really.
It's the patriarchy.
It's the patriarchy. Fuck the patriarchy.
Yes, indeed.
That's what hashtag FTP means for anybody who hasn't caught on yet.
Here we are. Merchandise coming soon. Eileen, talk to me a little bit about like the season and the archetype of the seasons for spring, summer, fall, winter. If we look at this as an opportunity to really apply cyclical living or living in alignment with nature, what can the seasons tell us?
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's start with fall, because we are moving into fall as we record this. It is the autumn equinox tomorrow, and you'll be listening a week and a bit after that shift in seasons happens. And I love the way that cyclical living works, because a bunch of the things I'm going to speak to of the energies of fall, you'll be like, oh, but that's the menstrual cycle. Oh, but that's the lunar cycle. Oh, but that's the phase of life. And that's the beauty, is that there's cycles within cycles. So fall is really this slowing down kind of energy, this turning inwards kind of energy. Depending whether you're working with just the trio maiden, mother, crone, or if you're working with the 4 archetypes of maiden, mother, crone, death, this season could be kind of the end of mother season or fully into crone season. It's about detail-oriented work and wrapping up projects. So anybody who follows their menstrual cycle or the lunar cycle will know that the luteal phase, so that's between ovulation and the beginning of a bleed, or that waning moon as the moon moves from full to new, that's that kind of inward detail-oriented work that's so good. And you can think about it too in terms of the leaves fall at this time of year. So releasing, letting go of what we don't need. I often think about autumn cleaning, just like we do spring cleaning. I mean, we're about to move inside for a full nearly 6 months in Canada. So like, get your space clean before you do. And then also of that, like composting, the leaves fall, it creates a layer of protection for all the insects and the plants that are going to go dormant over the winter. And then it will turn to compost and fertile mulch to nourish the seeds that get planted in the fall and over winter to grow in the spring again.
One of my favorite times of the year.
Most of us witches feel that way.
This is
I
our
didn't,
season.
yeah, I didn't used to. I didn't mind fall itself, but I really dreaded winter. And so fall was like a case of the Sunday scaries for any of you who have a 9 to 5 grind that you're not loving. It felt like that. Oh, winter's coming. I don't want it to be here. I don't know if you feel the same. As I've gotten older, I'm like, no, this is good. I'm ready to sleep more.
Yeah, we're here. I've always loved fall, but also my birthday's in the fall. And where I grew up, we had lots of leaves changing. So it's just a really beautiful time of year. I
Mm,
didn't feel that Sunday scary or that winter panic until the first snowfall. And so if
mm,
that cut into my fall season, which it always did, if that especially cut into my Halloween, which it
mm.
often did, I was like, not today. Not today, winter, not today. But I really welcomed this slowing down, and probably with my constitution and whatnot as well. Like, fall is my time. Like, I am into a cozy sweater, I'm into a wool sock, I'm into like leggings, and like, give me the plaid jacket, okay? Just give it to me. I'm here. I'm here for it. So yeah, I've really loved fall. Actually, fall and spring are probably my favorite seasons, and I'll have some more
Mhm.
comments whenever we come to spring. But winter,
Yeah,
you're fine. You're
I will
okay.
deal.
You will
I
deal.
like I like the first snowfall because
Yeah.
it's magical.
Hmm.
I hear you about I grew up in the mountains in Canmore, and so we had our Halloween costumes were made to go over snowsuits for sure.
Yes.
And fall in Alberta is a really short season, and that might be part of why I didn't like it because it was sometimes as short as like 2-3 weeks. It was like blink and you miss it. So yeah, with that, we'll move into winter, which is what we're moving towards. And winter energy is really one of hibernation. So that's when the bears hibernate and the animals are, they're out to find food, but they're a lot in their dens, keeping warm, huddling close, saving energy because there's less food. And it would be the same for our ancestors. The harvest has come in. There's not a lot to do if you don't have electricity other than hang out around a fire inside and swap stories. And so I have found a lot more joy in winter now that I follow the Wheel of the Year celebrations because Yule is such a lovely, cozy community time. But that sense of rest, there's death energy or crone energy, again, depending if you're working with a trio or a quadruplet?
Well,
Quad? Yeah, that's easier. Lots of time for introspection, consolidating, learning. It's the sense of the new moon and menstruation too. And so the winter gives us that permission to rest, to sleep more. It's dark for longer. Sleep. Same goes with menstruation, those first 2-3 days of your cycle. And I know it's not possible for a lot of people, but if you are menstruating, and you're able to build in more sleep and rest and try not to give yourself social engagements during those times, it's really intended as a time of sleep and rest and taking care of yourself.
and my favorite time of my cycle. Well, I should say, like, my favorite time of that part of my cycle is those first 2 days
Mm.
of just like going deep.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself, I
Mm-hmm.
read more, like I'm offline more, I read more, I sleep in. And I definitely, as somebody who has worked a 9 to 5 for a very long time, I definitely dreaded the days where I needed to be out and on or presenting during those first few days of my cycle. It felt very misaligned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
I also love the winter, this whole, like, of course, this Yule season, but winter for me is also about people coming together, like people gathering.
Mm.
There's a lot of gathering that happens in other seasons, say, for example, but people gathering for the sheer joy of celebration. And if we look at this through the rest of the seasons, we can see that there's sort of like tasking to prepare for us to take our foot off the pedal in the winter season. And in that winter season, like the point of gathering is really to just be with each other and to
Mm-hmm.
have time together. And I think of this also as like a time for preparation, like from a food perspective, as a time for preparation or to really reap the benefits and the rewards of the preparation that has been for the rest of the year.
Yeah, there's that frenzy of harvest, which is, even though it's moving into fall and the energies are slowing down, there is kind of that last push. And so the winter is needed to recuperate and to come together and enjoy the abundance that you've harvested and all the effort you've put in, and hold space for each other and tell stories. And the celebration of being with other humans is a huge part of winter, for sure, even though it is also a very inward time.
It is.
Yeah. And
Let's
then we
talk
get the spring.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it's one of your two favorite seasons. It certainly is for me as well. I realized this year that I thought I was a summer girl, and I'm like, no, I like the promise of summer. But the actual reality of it, I don't dislike it, but I prefer spring. And so it's that, that new beginning energy. There's promise in the air. It's maiden energy. There's this like excitement and innocence about it. The fertility is just like budding below the surface, brimming. Yeah, for sure. I wish people could see me because I'm brimming with my hands. There's a lot of creation at this time, or potential of creation, and it's associated with the waxing moon or the follicular phase of your menstrual cycle, if you're following that, and that maiden energy. I think I said that already.
This is a time for you to think about launching programs. This is a time for you to think about starting something new. This is a time for you to finally do the thing that you said you were going to do in those winter and fall seasons. It's like, it's time now to set the foundation. I really feel like spring is the beginning in a lot of ways of the new year because of this, of course, this maiden energy.
It is. And you know what? In a lot of cultures, that is when the new year lands, is around Imbolc, which is in February, but the Chinese New Year begins closer to spring. February is very much still winter in Canada, but not in all places.
I put my Birkenstocks back on in February. Okay, out west.
Well, yes, you are. Not here. Not here. February is often the coldest month of the year where I am. So
you get
minus 30. Yeah, no Birkenstocks. I actually don't own Birkenstocks.
Wow.
That's like full disclosure.
Wow.
I know. I used to, when I was still working as a midwife, I'd go to births and, we'd each have a student. There'd be myself in the backup or whatever. There might be like 4 or 5 and a doula. So there'd be 4 or 5 birth workers there. And I would go to the door and it would all be Birkenstocks. I was the only midwife who didn't own them.
Yeah. They're popular amongst some crowd. You just somehow skirted that.
Somehow. Yeah, I don't know. I look at them, I'm like, they look great. Cool. Onwards.
Yeah.
Not for me.
I want to come back to something that you said, and I just want to soften this a little bit. Yes, it's Chinese New Year, but it's actually a lunar New Year in a lot of cultures. And I think that that's such a great opportunity for us to turn a new leaf. Like, of course, we have these moments that we've seen in more popular culture. And actually, for most of Asia, they celebrate this Lunar New Year.
Yes, thank you.
And I love that it is around the first new moon of the year, which is just like chef's kiss.
Yeah, so good. And then there's the other new year that happens in the spring at the beginning of the astrological year, which is Aries season. And that is going to greet us in April?
Aries season starts in March.
Good grief.
Goes to April. Taurians are taking over May, and so is Gemini.
I did know that. My best friend, if she's listening to this, will be like, I am an Aries, you know that. I'm born in March. Know. I do know her birthday. I just had one of those brain fart moments where I'm like, oh no, I'm on the spot and I'm saying a thing and I didn't think it out.
You're here. I'm here for you. I got you.
I knew you got me. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons that a lot of us feel as though the new year, the new beginning begins with the spring and the energies, and our whole, like, the Gregorian calendar starting on January 1st, it just doesn't line up with like any new beginning energy. We either follow the wheel of the year, which Samhain, Halloween, that's winter. That's where the new year starts, just like the first day of your menstrual cycle is the first day of your bleed. or using spring as your new year, you might find that the energies align a bit better to flow with that idea. I think last year I celebrated like 5 different New Years.
As
like
you,
this one and this one and this one. Okay, I'll start again.
let's do it.
Yeah. And then yeah, after spring obviously comes summer, and it's that energy of growth, it's mother energy. So we have the earth is abundant, it's fertile, that pregnant energy, it's quite sensual. Often as spring into summer, we get Beltane, that's a fire festival that's also associated with lots of sensuality and sexuality. So we're moving into that kind of energy, and that's what fertility is. And the earth is fertile as we are fertile, and it's connected in those cycles with the full moon and with ovulation, both of which are high outward facing energetic times. So this is when we make all the plans and do all the things and meet all the people, and it's great to harness that. And it can be really easy to go overboard too.
Yeah, it definitely can. And I think as well, it's like, if we think about the summertime, like this is where we do, unless you're me, we do a lot of grilling, like food wise. We do a lot of grilling. We do a lot of raw food. We do a lot of salads, cold food to counteract that heat of the season. And I think as well with summertime, like this is a moment for us to be out and to be seen. We're in the full light. We have light for so much longer during the day. So we have this like outward facing season that we're on for longer periods of time. And if we apply this to like how society tells us we need to be productive for however many hours a day, and then we go home and we take care of our family, like the season never ends with that thinking. And that you have a really great opportunity. Lots of times in the summer season, this is a time for businesses to really like be out there, to be socializing, to meet new people, to, to do events along those lines of really being out and in the light of the day.
And just in the counter to, how you said you really hated when you had to do presentations or anything at work when you're on your bleed. The reverse is true when you're ovulating or in that summer season of life too, is like present, be seen, you're magnetic, you're attractive, your body is literally sending out come look at me, come be near me signals and hormones. So it's a really cool to harness that kind of energy as well. And I didn't mention the elements that are associated with each season as we went through. I kind of forgot, but they are each associated with an element and associated with a direction as well on the Earth compass direction. So as we are moving into fall, it's that water element. It's an emotional season. Water is representative of emotions, and it's the west. North is the winter. It's where the ancestors live. It's the earth element. So yeah, dark and earthy and grounded and rooted. Yeah. And then in spring, we've got the element of air, which is all about communication and excitement and the east and new beginnings in the east. And summer is fire. No surprise there. It's that passion and creativity, and the direction is south.
That's great. Shall we talk about ether? The ethereal?
Yes, I want you to talk about ether.
I will happily talk about the ethereal. So we also have an element of ether in here. So we have the seasons, and then we have this like unknown. And the unknown is the element of this like gaseous substance that is everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. Not to be mysterious about it. It's the keeper, like I said, it's the keeper of the unknown. It's a potential for new creation. And I describe this as the pregnant pause during an ohm. So if we think about when we sound an ohm, or a primordial scream, even for that matter, after the scream has been completed, the tone has been heard, there is a moment before the next one starts that is that pregnant pause. It's pure potential. Anything can happen in this exact moment. This is an opportunity for anything to come to fruition. And I think that we have access to that during any season. We can apply this during any season, and we can have this as its own season. This is, the part of my life where I have slowed down. Let's say, for example, if we're thinking about winter, I've slowed down, and this is the pregnant pause before the potential of spring to come in. This is the in spring, the moment of potential for the flowers and the vegetables to bloom. In fall, it's the harvest that happens. And then going back into, from fall to winter, going back into this idea of a moment for us to get the last push of things completed before we rest.
Mm-hmm.
So the ethereal realm is with us at all times and can be tapped into on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm. And with an intention to take those pauses and insert them between, just like there's a pause at every breath, there's a pause between breaths, there's a pause between seasons. If we can consciously bring it to awareness, we can kind of create it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And I think about this, like a really good example of this is in Ontario, where I grew up. There was always this concept of like, is this the last snowfall?
Yeah.
Is this the last snowfall? Is this the final one?
Is it?
And that's the like ethereal potential right there. Is this the last day of
again?
Yeah, am I gonna have to shovel again? Is right. Or is this the last like hot and sunny day?
Mm-hmm.
Is this the last of our rainy season? It's never the last of our rainy season out here, let's be real. But this summer was beautiful and long, and I'm thankful for that. But is this the last of the rain before it starts to snow? That's the ethereal pause that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Almost like a beautiful question mark.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think for us to speak a little bit about how the seasons outwardly don't always match up with the seasons inwardly. So I was asked this on a podcast as well, actually, and it was the sense of like, what do you do if you are moving into a season of, say, grief in your life, but that's not the energy? What if it's summer and that's not the energy of summer? Grief is the energy of winter. That's death energy. How do you navigate that? And I'd love if you'd speak to that first, and I'll respond a little bit, just because I know that you have some wisdom to share there.
Yeah. I feel like I know this firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
My beloved father passed away just on the cusp of us turning into the summer, from spring to summer, and carrying grief in the moments of summer. It's interesting. It kind of follows the hours in the day. Like, yes, of course I can be grieving at like 9 a.m. when the sun is shining. I literally, grief is so not linear and will hit you at any moment in any part of your life. But it is an opportunity for us, I think, emotionally, no matter what's happening through the season, for us to take a moment and go inside for that remembrance. And especially with grief for me, in experiencing this, it is something that winter is coming. Like, there's nothing that we can do to stop winter. There's nothing. I can will that away as much as possible. And when those first kind of flakes of snow appear, there's almost relief that it's here.
The waiting is over. The unknown is over.
Yeah. And so I think, especially with grief, we have all of this anticipation when it comes to milestones, like the first anniversary of death, let's say the first birthday of people who were really important in the person who's past's life, or important dates. And it's interesting for me to really think about how those moments are opportunities for me to give myself permission to take a seat and a nap and a cry and a bath and a walk and a phone call, because the more I embrace that, it's the same thing. Like, the more we embrace, dreading winter for me is really, I have come to terms with winter and I actually really enjoy it, but I dread the driving in winter. But on this path, mentally, we can deny the inevitable for as long as we need to. But until we just embrace where that is with us, that we almost make it harder for ourselves. And it's like, it's too hot outside. No, it's too hot. If we just embraced a little bit of energy that is hibernating in a place that feels really cool, then we give ourselves what we need. And I think that that's the reflection that we really need. Tell me a little bit about your path and your experience with grief in the seasons.
Yeah. Well, I really love that you said it's non-linear, because as you were saying that, it just brought to mind this whole cycle again. You know, you'll have the deep grief that'll progress to, oh, there's hope and life coming back and some fun and energy, and then there'll be a turning in and the grief will be right back.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the analogy of, people would say time heals all wounds, but I love the analogy with grief, that the grief, it's always the same size and shape, but you are the box and you grow. And so as the grief bounces around inside you, it doesn't hit the edges quite as frequently as you grow and heal. And so it's always there with you, but you just have more space around it. I have been very lucky in my life to not have any really big, like, losses that hit me with that kind of grief. I've lost a grandparent, and actually a few that I didn't know very well, but even the grandmother that I knew well, I remember being kind of detached, and I wasn't as in tune with my body. There's probably a lot more grief than than I even was able to acknowledge.
Right.
But thinking about any kind of big shift or life transition, even that's out of whack with the season. So I think about leaving my ex, which was a very positive thing, but it was still very hard and traumatic and heavy. And that happened in the spring. And so the energies were so different than the outward energies initially. I did kind of want to hibernate and be alone and be sobbing in my bed and figuring out what I was going to do next and who I was without this relationship I'd been in for 10 years. And I also didn't have this path and this knowledge. So I didn't process that. I'm still processing that a little bit. And I'm processing leaving midwifery in waves. It comes in waves. The leftovers of that career are, yeah, they're they're big and deep. And so the knowledge of cyclical living and these energies gives me the ability, when any kind of griefs do bubble up, to surrender to them, to allow them, to not push them down, to not stuff them away and ignore them, knowing and trusting that the winter will become spring. It just always does. And I don't need to do anything other than allow.
Justify.
Yeah.
I'm here with you.
Yeah.
I think we need a whole episode on grief, actually, coming soon to a podcast video.
Oh, yes. Okay, so spoiler alert, I will be writing a book. It's coming. I've started, kind of. But I sat down to write. It's about rest. And the first thing I sat down with, I was like, the first chapter is about grief. Because what is going to happen when people slow down and rest is all that grief that we've been denying and pushing aside and stuffing down is going to come up.
It's right there. It's just waiting for you.
So yes, an episode on that and holding yourself through grief is definitely coming.
I love this. Shall we shift the conversation more towards the lunar cycle and how this is also a cycle of the earth that we can live by?
Yes, I think that's a lovely shift, a lovely point to shift. And we brought attention to it already because of the mirrors, but I'd love you to take us through the energies, because I know you work with astrology really closely. So I'd love to hear your kind of take or your suggestions or whatever insights you want to offer up about it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the moon cycle, the lunar cycle, as an opportunity, very much like the seasons, for us to live in alignment with the energies. And I think probably most people have heard of like, oh, is it a full moon? Oh, it must be a full moon, because at the full moon, like, wilding happens. And lots of babies are born, and apparently lots of parasites start to
and
come out of their
emergency room is full.
Well, exactly. So we can see that in the lunar cycle. We can see kind of why the full moon is the way the full moon is. But I'm going to start with the new moon. Before we start this, I want to say, so we have the seasons, which is like the broader Gregorian year calendar concept. We can drill this down to a much more kind of intimate and, I want to say, daily exchange of energy through the moon, through the lunar cycle, because this kind of brings it from this Heidi concept of spring, and of course there's new beginnings, but also we have still moon cycles that happen 3 times during the spring season. The lunar cycle is really an opportunity for us to look at our 29 and a half really days of energy and how it waxes and wanes during this period. So we start with the new moon. And the new moon, like our spring season, is the opportunity to set new intentions. It's an opportunity for us to look back a little bit at how far we've come and forward to where we want to go. It's an opportunity for us to slow down a little bit. Just before the new moon happens, we have literally the darkness, or the dark side of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And this dark period, as the winter period of the season, is the opportunity for us to take a pause, this pregnant ethereal pause, before we start something new. So often in new moon practices, we're setting new intentions, we're bringing things to light, we're releasing things into the world, really. Mm-hmm. It's a great chance for you to think about what it is that you want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Setting some seeds of intention. I really like solo practices for the new moon, or really like quiet contemplation practices, a bath and a meditation, or some journaling by candlelight, to keep that darkness sacred and holy.
The waxing moon, as we move forward into this, is really the seeds that we've intended to plant have been planted, and it is a moment for us to do some watering. Mm-hmm. And so this may be practices as we prepare for the summer season of our life. I said that the new moon, was spring, and it's not, it's actually winter season. So the waxing moon is the spring season of like doing the watering, tending the practices that we need to tend to in order to harvest what it is that we want to harvest. And so during this lunar phase, this part of the month, we might find ourselves gaining a little bit of traction and gaining a little bit of energy and wanting to be a little bit more seen, and wanting to, like, thinking about future ways that we can really be out and about. And this is, for me, this is like the practice for ovulation and the practice for the full moon. So the full moon is where things have fully come to light. If we think about this in terms of witchery, often practices around this part of the lunar cycle were to celebrate. They were to come out. This is fire season. This is for us to come out and be wild and primordial, scream and dance, and to be together
in the forest.
and to be like in the full light. And this is also a time where we really can see things clearly. So if there's anything that we have, laid down an intention for, but we have not quite brought it to fruition, the full moon is a time that we see those blocks or the barriers. Like, this is the shadow work. The moon at its fullest casts the longest shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where often our shadows are seen more clearly, if you will.
Yeah, the light of the moon shines into all those dark crevices that we were ignoring.
Yes, for far too long.
Mm-hmm.
This is also a time where in my cycle, it's where I read the most cards. And I say this both for myself in setting an intentions, but often I'm asking the cards and using my tarot and my oracle practice to tell me what is blocking, like what is going on here? What do I need to know? What do I need to know? And so this is a good opportunity, if you do have a practice with tarot or with oracle, to really ramp that up during the full moon to get the intuitive insights that you need.
Yeah, and I know that you offer that tarot reading for your community as well online every full moon, which is a beautiful offering.
Yeah.
And,
for 3 days, a day before, a day after the official new moon, you can book a 1-card reading with me. That's just like a little love bomb.
Full moon, not new moon.
Oh, full moon, not new moon. Don't come at me at the new moon, okay? And then we have the waning moon, and this is where the literal light of the moon starts to go back into that darkness. But the waning moon is an opportunity for us to harvest. It's an opportunity for, like, we've picked the bugs from the plant so that it can fully grow, and now we are ready to harvest. And so the waning moon is a moment to slow down and to look ahead and to see what's coming next. And I really think that the waxing and the waning moon phases of the lunar cycle, we put a lot of emphasis on the new and full moon. And there is so much that we can be doing during the waxing and waning moon. And for me, I really see the waning moon as an opportunity for us to slow down, to rest more, to get clear on the next steps.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we think about it, the energies of the new moon and the full moon, they're each about 3 days. And so that's only 6 days of this 29 and a bit day cycle. So it is these moments of emphasis, but the other two parts of the cycle are really the majority of the time that we're living in. And so learning how to work with those and harness those energies is so important and helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are we could go down like really deep rabbit holes here talking about different types of activities and different types of foods that are associated with these phases and how they line up energetically with the menstrual phases as well. I like to think about it as just the energies of the season. Like in the winter, I don't want to go jogging outside. I'm probably going to want to do some gentle yin yoga inside. So that helps me remember these things. But if you are in a body that has a menstrual cycle and you bleed, you may or may not line up with the moon cycle. So if we lived without any kind of artificial light, most women would cycle with the moon. However, that's not how we live. And so most of us don't exactly follow the lunar cycle, or you might be flipped. I know myself personally, I'm often a red moon cycler, which was associated with healers and midwives because in ancient times, women who were bleeding would all come together at the same time in the tent, and you'd need somebody who was feeling like a little more energetic to take care of you. So I think that's where that piece came from. But it's an interesting balance when you're cycling out of sync with the moon, because the moon's energies are still going to be affecting you. I feel like at the end of the day, if you are are feeling pulled to pay attention to an energy that doesn't sync up with either the season or the moon cycle, it's likely because your body is in a different cycle or season. And it could be your own hormones, it could be something like grief affecting it. I always want to point to trusting your own self and your intuition and doing what feels right to you. Just because we've said like when it's the full moon, you should be out and partying. But if you're like, no, I really want to just sleep and cuddle this hot water bottle because I'm bleeding, or because my partner just broke up with me, then that is the right cycle for you. That is the real place for you to be landing. So none of this is prescriptive. It's all, yeah, exploratory and supportive, but not like dogma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As also somebody who is on the red moon cycle, my energies often don't line up with what's going on. And so I find myself in the new moon, during the new moon, wanting to slow down. Not in the way of like starting something new, but really in the menstrual way of like getting, or excuse me, not the new moon, the full moon, getting a little bit more rest. And so understanding for myself a few things, because, it's really special to understand your cycle and how that links up with the lunar cycle and how that links up with the season. And I know for me, when I want to switch my cycle, like naturally full moon, red moon, it's me. And when I want to switch every couple of months, I go, let's just see if we can intend going back to a new moon and get on this. And so I can, it happens. I intend to set my intention, new moon, we're gonna start to bleed with you. And probably in a month or two later, my cycle will change over to sync up with that. And then I forget that it's in that cycle. Like I have left my intention, I have brought it to fruition, and my cycle slowly trickles back to the full moon. So I think it's good to know that, of course, this is not dogma, and that we have the ability to align ourselves with intention.
Yeah.
And it's not that we can't spend the whole summer sleeping and the whole winter partying, because it happens, especially because, you might be spending your winters in a summer sunny climate. And so you would bring those energies into your day-to-day life. And I think the beauty of knowing all of this is knowing how to manage expectation and energy, and to honor our energy through each moment of every day. Especially the majority of the people who are going to be listening to this are most likely assigned female at birth, and or those who live in a female body now. And our energy cycles every 28 to 36 days on average. And somebody who's assigned male at birth and or lives as male energy, that testosterone recycles every 24 hours.
24 hours. And that's where the workday model comes
started.
From. That is where this whole idea that we're supposed to wake up every morning with the same amount of energy and output all day and then rest in the evening and then start again, that comes from that totally different hormonal cycle. You touched on a point that reminded me I wanted to mention. If you're listening to this, even if you are in a male body, but definitely if you're in a assigned female at birth body, or a body who's female now, living female, if you don't bleed, because some people don't bleed for fertility reasons, some people have gone past moon pause or menopause, however we want to say that. Some people are not biologically female at birth and therefore their bodies aren't bleeding. The nice way to bring this in is to follow the cycle of the moon and the energies of the moon as though that were your menstrual or moon cycle.
Yes. And to really honor that time, that lunar cycle, sister, it will just rock your world.
Yeah.
It'll set you straight, I'll tell you that much. Any closing thoughts on living cyclically or living in alignment with nature?
I feel like we did a really good job of touching on each of the points, and each of these points could be its own whole episode and probably will as we move forward in this podcast, but it feels, again, like just reminding people to explore, get curious. If this topic strikes your interest, go down those rabbit holes, play with it, make notes in your journal or your day timer, like where are you in your cycle, or where is the moon in its cycle, and just start to notice how your energy is. And as I repeated over and over last time as well, like don't make yourself wrong. If you feel totally different to what the energies are saying, quote unquote saying, you should be feeling, that's okay. It's not wrong. You're not out of whack. Unless you feel like discomfited and out of whack, you're not. If you feel good, but your energies are opposite to what the environmental or seasonal energies are, that's okay. That's right for you in this moment.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thanks for really like giving that permission slip for everybody here that's listening.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure.
So we will ask you, if you enjoyed this episode, go over to the place that you listened to it and give it a rating and hit the subscribe button. We would love to have you. And we also want to invite you on the train, come to the train of our next episode, which will be dropping next Monday.
It sure will. And if you head over to our socials and follow along, we've got a little giveaway running for this first launch week, where if you do rate and leave a review, you take a picture of the fact that you did so, post it on your Instagram story, and tag both of us at I am Ellie Christine and at myluminous_life_. This is all in the show notes. You don't have to remember it, but you will be entered in a draw to win a session with one of us. So that's your incentive to follow along and come back next time too.
Yeah, 2 sessions.
2 sessions. Yes, that's true. One with each of us.
So 2 winners. Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. See you on Monday.